guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Iliana and I'm a certified success coach. Here with me today, I've got Dr. Paul Penn. Hi and welcome. He's a psychologist and also my husband. Today's topic is on the imposter syndrome and I'm going to share with you 5 tips on how to avoid falling victim to it. Now, have you ever felt that your successes are just down to luck, that you feel that you don't know enough, that you feel like a fraud and you're soon going to get found out? Now, we've all experienced feelings of doubt and unworthiness. However, if your accomplishments are down to your hard work, your persistence and your knowledge, and you still feel like you're not enough, then you're probably suffering from the imposter syndrome. So what is imposter syndrome, Paul?
Well, imposter syndrome is kind of a byproduct, if you like, of a weird dissociation that occurs between knowledge and, if you like, the perception of our competence. And if you just think of an obvious example, if you're learning something new, when you start learning something, you're not aware of how much is out there that you don't yet know. But of course, one of the consequences of becoming more knowledgeable is you start to have a much greater awareness of how much it is you don't know. So it's not that you're not making progress or that you're a fraud or a fake. It's just that with progress comes an increased understanding of just how much there is out there that you've yet to kind of experience and yet to come to terms with. So that effectively is what imposter syndrome is. It's the opposite of something we call the Dunning-Kruger effect in psychology. And the Dunning-Kruger effect is almost like the opposite, where it's the people that are the least competent or the least knowledgeable that have the most inflated idea about how much they know or how skilled they are.
Fantastic. Well, let's get started with the 5 tips.
So Eliana, as a coach, what do you tell clients about how to identify when they might be experiencing imposter syndrome?
We often overlook signs of the imposter syndrome that come up in our day-to-day lives. So tip number 1 would be to know the signs. Recognizing them is the first step into overcoming them. You might be suffering from the imposter syndrome if, for example, you find it hard to accept praise, you're convinced that you're not enough, you feel lucky sometimes and that like you didn't deserve it and you'll get found out. So instead, pay attention to your language choices when you're talking, especially about your work, to your friends or your colleagues, and when you're thinking about it yourself. So instead, what you need to do is some reflective thinking. Where does those thoughts are coming from? And journal on those.
In psychology, when we're looking at topics like procrastination, for example, something that people often intuitively think is that being a perfectionist might be the cause of some of their ills, the reason they don't get on with anything. Do you think perfectionism might have a role in imposter syndrome too?
Tip number 2 would be to let go of your inner perfectionist. Perfectionism is a major roadblock on overcoming the imposter syndrome, and it basically just feeds into it more and more. So the more people that are suffering from the imposter syndrome are usually high achievers, people that have really high standards for themselves as well and are committed to doing the best and being the best. But you have to remember that no one and nothing can ever be perfect. Those are standards that are impossible or unrealistic. So instead, ask yourself, when is good enough? Good enough. And also remember the phrase, done is always better than perfect.
So one of the things we'd often advise people to do in psychology when they're being particularly hard on themselves, for example, is thinking about trying to decenter from their own perspective and trying to take the view that maybe a third person would take. So what advice would you give people from a coaching perspective if they're particularly suffering with imposter syndrome?
Well, imposter syndrome often manifests itself as this little negative voice that says you're not good enough, you're not smart enough, you're a fraud. So tip number 3 would always be to be kind to yourself, to really take your time and change that negative self-talk into a positive one. And also challenge that. Instead of just saying, I got lucky, challenge that thinking in asking yourself, what steps did I take to actually get to this point? It's also really good to use positive affirmation at this point because they can help improve your stress levels to go down and your anxiety as well. When you were using positive statements, and that is going to build a bridge into your subconscious mind, which is obviously going to help with imposter syndrome.
One thing we often find in psychology is that people have quite a negative bias when it comes to evaluating their performance. They systematically sort of, lambast themselves for their failings and forget to reward themselves for their successes. So, is there any advice you give from a coaching perspective which kind of encourages people to reflect on their successes when they're experiencing a bout of kind of, imposter syndrome?
Well, tip number 4 would be to track and measure that success, because when you feel like an imposter, the hardest thing to do is be aware of the role that you had in achieving this success. And sometimes you might think that your own hard work, knowledge, and preparation had nothing to do with it. So, in order to help show yourself you're doing really well and keeping track of it, maybe try and celebrate those successes, but also become aware of it. So the first step, for example, this could look different for different people, could be having a folder on your emails on keeping track of the positive feedbacks that your boss or your colleagues may have told you. Or for example, if you're an influencer, keep track of your posts and the page views that you're receiving as well, or the positive comments from your fans. So keeping track and measuring your success is a great way to know that you're not a fraud, that you did deserve the success you're having, obviously.
So I recall seeing a piece of advice recently. I think it was one of the tenets from Jordan Peterson's book, actually, 12 Rules for Life, where he said, compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not who someone else is today. And I always thought there's a great deal of wisdom in that from a psychological perspective. What does a coach have to say about the notion of comparisons to either self or others?
And tip number 5 would be to avoid comparisons. Everyone is good at something. You have skills that other people don't possess, and vice versa. So avoid comparing yourself to others. And if you do compare, just remember, if that person was able to achieve that success, that is possible for you as well. And each person accomplishes life stages in their own time. So don't try and be an expert since day one. It takes time to arrive there. So remember to avoid comparisons if you want to get rid of your imposter syndrome. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to this video. I'll also add Paul's channel details below as well. And if you feel that you struggle from the imposter syndrome, why not take advantage of my free 20 minutes consultation? You'll find the details in the description below. See you guys soon. Take care. Bye.
Bye bye.